Send you just a contract review on page 48. This has 15 test questions on the exam, and then you'll have another 7 on the state. And there's a lot here that's going to help you there. Now, in my experience, when it comes to contracts, I think 5 of them are going to be a very straight, simple definition. I think there's going to be another 5 that are going to be more situational, such as a minor who signs a contract. What happens? We know it's voidable. Then the other 5 questions are going to be more story problem, such as buyer Amy signs an exclusive buyer agency with agent Lynette. Then Amy, as a buyer, goes to an open house and writes an offer with agent Jack. Is it possible that buyer Amy could end up paying 2 commissions? And look at your heads. Yes, the answer is yes. Now, what they'll do in that, though, is they'll give 2 yes answers and 2 no answers. It'll be yes, because she signed 2 exclusive agencies, or yes, because she likes paying more money. Or, I mean, it'll give you like 2 yes explainer, 2 no explainer. Or another, like, story problem 1 would be buyer Henry writes an offer and seller David accepts it. 3 days before closing, seller David decides he no longer wants to sell the property. Could seller David be liable for paying seller agent commissions? And again, it'll give you 2 yes and 2 no. And yes, we know that if that's what we agreed to do in the contract, he's in breach. So it's going to be a little bit more of a story problem. Slow down and read those, because I'm giving you the simple version of it, but those story problem questions are going to be longer, and they're going to give you content that doesn't really matter to what they're asking you. The other thing I want to remind you that we learned from the agency section: the listing agent represents the seller. The selling agent represents the buyer. So if they use that language, don't let them make you a fool and confuse you. Listing agent or listing broker represents seller. Selling agent or selling broker represents buyer. So slow down and read, because I've read questions where it's like, talking about broker A, telling this big story about broker A, and then at the last minute, it's got a question about broker B. So just make sure you slow down and read and reread. Can I say one thing about taking the exam? I noticed some of you, when you study, you move your lips and you read aloud or something like that. And I love that. I love that. If that's what helps you stay engaged and learn the content, I'm here for it. At the exam, that's going to land differently, obviously, because you're going to be in a test center with other people and you've got to be quiet. Now, if you go to the test center, I think it's pretty obvious you're not going to talk out loud. But I will say, at the test center, you can request earplugs if someone's really noisy. I sat next to someone one time that had what I called kennel cough the entire time I was testing, and it was very distracting. The test center back in the day, they've moved, but the test center in West Des Moines back in the day used to be next to a dance studio. So it was trying to take an exam while they were dropping a beat to jock jams. It was very distracting. They've moved locations since then. If you're taking the exam from home, if you're moving your lips and reading out loud, they will give you one warning and then you're done. After that, they'll just kick you out of the exam because their worry is you got someone hiding in the room that you're reading to, like me hiding under your desk or something for $500 a question and helping you answer it. We would never do that. And so that's why if you're reading aloud, even moving your lips, that's a red flag at home. And I've known people to be kicked out because of that. So just be careful, but do read and read very carefully. Again, about a third or 5 of these 15 test questions, they're going to be lengthy and they're going to give you some long story. Keep focused on what they're actually asking you. They're going to give you more information than they know just to distract you. Again, another third to me is going to be situational. Again, like the minor. And then another third is going to be straight up vocabulary, like what is a unilateral or bilateral contract, okay? Let's get back in. That was my opening speech. Let's get back into page 48. And contracts are a set of legal agreements or promises to do or not do something. Now, technically, contracts can be oral or written, but they must contain these 5 elements in order to be valid. They must contain these 5 elements in order to be valid. It must be a voluntary decision. It must be a set of agreements or promises. It's got to be done by legally competent parties. Sound mind and legal age. The 4th one is consideration. There's got to be a value stated on the contract. That's not the deposit, that's the purchase price in real estate or the value of the lease. And number 5, it's got to be for a legal act. Anybody ever seen the show Breaking Bad? No contracts between those two because it's not for a legal act. Maybe Jesse would have stayed in line a little bit. No, I'm just kidding. I love that show. I thought I'd learn more about making meth, though, and laundering money. I really did. I got too absorbed in the characters. On page 49, statute of frauds. This could be a definition term. Statute of frauds means that there are some documents that in order to be legal, they must be written. They cannot be oral. In Iowa, listing agreements is a great example. I cannot promote someone's property for sale without a written listing agreement. That's Iowa putting some statute of frauds in place. Let's hop over to page 50 where we've got bilateral and unilateral contracts. Again, this could be a good definition. A bilateral contract is when both parties are doing something, or all parties to the contract are doing something. I'm paying Hector $100,000 for his property, and in exchange, he's going to give me clear title. We're both doing something. A unilateral contract happens when only one party is performing and the other party is sitting there holding tight. They can't sell it to anyone else. Both a unilateral and bilateral have got to have those 5 elements that make a valid contract. That's a definition. A situational test question around this would be what type of contract is an option? And an option is a unilateral type of contract. I think another key part that you're going to have a lot of situational is going to be on page 51 and very top of page 52. This is what happens. Number one, you might have a definition of what an offer is. An offer is a proposal to purchase something from a buyer to a seller or a tenant to a landlord when it comes to real estate. An offer is an agreement to purchase or rent real estate between buyer and seller, tenant and landlord. That's an offer. Now we've got options, and where I think it could be situational for you is, do we have a contract or not? Do we have a deal or not? Deal or no deal is going to be the situation that they might ask you in these questions. So if we've got an offer from a buyer and an acceptance from a seller, yes, we've got a deal. But let's define what is acceptance. Acceptance means the seller has signed the agreement and notified the buyer. So it's got to be accepted and delivered. Having offer and acceptance, another term they might use is meeting of the mind. Offer and acceptance is not only accepting it, but it's giving notice to the other party. So if a seller signs the agreement but never returns it to the buyer, do we have a deal? No, we do not. The next layer is the word rescind. Now, the word I use in my business is withdraw. The buyer is withdrawing the offer. On the exam, I've seen them use rescind, which sometimes your brain has a little freeze and you temporarily forget what words mean. So that's why I've used rescind to prompt you that that might be the word they use on the exam. If a buyer withdraws an offer, yes, they are able to do that at any time before it was accepted. So even though the seller maybe has until noon tomorrow as a deadline, the buyer any time before then can withdraw the offer. Once they're given notice of acceptance, then they've got a deal. They can't withdraw. Now they're legally bound. But any time before the seller accepts, even if there's a deadline, any time before that acceptance, the buyer can withdraw or rescind their offer. Remember when we were talking in the state information, it said present all offers in a timely manner? Number one rule of Real Estate Fight Club, present all offers in a timely manner. This is where the timely manner makes a big difference. Just because a seller has until noon tomorrow to wait doesn't mean they should. Because the buyer could withdraw it at any time before it's accepted. Next on the list, and this one might be a candidate that could have multiple questions around this concept of counteroffer. Now, counteroffer is when a seller makes any change to the originally written contract. Any change. Don't let anyone fool you into thinking that it's just a change in price. No. Any change on the amount of the deposit, the closing date, where deposits are held, the length of the inspection period, any change on that contract is a counteroffer. A counteroffer, by definition, rejects the original offer, meaning it no longer exists. So I write an offer at 300 to you as the seller, and you come back to me and say, no, I want 310. And I say, no, thank you. And I walk away. And the seller comes back and says, oh, no, 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 never mind. I'll do 300. Am I obligated to buy it at 300 now? No, I am not. Because the moment they came back at 310, my 300 dissipates. It doesn't exist. So there's a couple layers there that I think you could get asked on a counter offer. Rejection. This means the seller provides no feedback. They just say no. They just say no. Now, rejection could happen in a couple of different ways. The most common way is you get multiple offers on a listing. Your seller gets 5 offers. They accept the one they want to work with and they reject the other 4. And for your career, I'm going to recommend you have your seller sign a rejection. That way, everyone knows that you did the number 1 rule of Fight Club real estate style and you presented all offers. You know, everyone then is very clear the seller saw it because they signed the rejection, right? Yeah. Another time that a rejection might happen is maybe a buyer writes an offer and for whatever reason, the seller's offended by it. It's too low. The terms of the contract don't make sense. And they don't give a counteroffer. They don't give another proposal. They just simply do not respond. Last but not least, very top of page 52 is expiration. There was a response deadline by the seller. That time came and went. The seller did not respond. The seller did not accept. And again, that offer expires just like milk. Legal status of a contract. This could be a situational again to me, maybe a couple that are definition. A valid contract, middle of page 52. A valid contract means it has all 5 of those elements. It's voluntary. It's a set of it's a set of agreements or promises, legally competent parties, consideration. It's for a legal act. That's a valid contract. Unenforceable. My example of that is it was never formed into a valid contract. So, for example, I came to you and said, will you sell my property for $150,000 and I'll pay you X in commissions? And then you never sold my property. And I say, hey, I hired you to sell my house and you never did it. I'm taking you to court. That very well is going to be unenforceable because Iowa law required that listing agreement to be in writing. We're missing the statute of frauds. Now we're in the middle between void and voidable. Void means it was missing one of those 5 elements. It wasn't for a legal act. Void can also happen by mutual agreement. A buyer and a seller can end a contract by both declaring it void by mutual agreement, which means they both are agreeing they want it to completely end, and then they're going to go their separate ways. The one I think you'll have on the exam, and you could have it more than once, is voidable. It's someone that signs a contract under duress or a minor. My bet, it's going to be a minor. You might get a question that straight up says, a contract signed by a minor is considered voidable, voidable, voidable. Or you might get a question that's more situational or even story problem that talks about a 17-year-old who inherited a property that he couldn't keep and he's got to sell it. So he hires Agent Alice. Agent Alice sells this property and has him sign a listing agreement. They get an accepted offer. It's signed. And then when he signs the deed, he's turned 18. What would we consider this transaction? Well, because he was 17 when he got the party started, I think the correct answer is voidable because he was a minor, right? So that could be another style of question around that. Let's talk about maybe letter of intent on the middle of page 53. This could be a good one. That's a definition. A letter of intent is a simplified proposal to buy real estate, often used in commercial real estate. Earnest money is like good faith money or a deposit in real estate. It gets put into that escrow or trust account that we've talked a lot about. On page 54, they're kind of in the middle under other contract provisions. We've already declared that an option is a type of unilateral contract. Top of page 55, this is one that could be situational. Time is of the essence. They're at the very top. Time is of the essence does not mean ASAP. Time is of the essence. If your mother said that to you, that means you're getting up and doing your chores, right? In real estate contracts, time is of the essence means we've got to hit certain deadlines in the contract in order to fulfill our promises and close in a timely manner. So it means we maybe agreed to do earnest money in 5 days, an inspection in 10 days, an appraisal in 20, final loan approval in 30. We've got all these many deadlines in order to get to closing day. Now, here's how time of the essence works that might look like more of what I'm going to call a story problem question. Buyer and seller agree that earnest money will be delivered within 10 business days on the contract. Buyer and seller agree to it. Can the seller call the buyer and demand it on the second day? No. They've got until 11:59 p.m. of the 10th day. This also means that if 10 days goes by and the buyer hasn't made that deposit, they are at some level of a breach in the contract. Another example would be home inspection. Let's say we agree to do that in 5 business days. Can the seller demand it on day 1? No. But it also means if that 5 days goes by and the buyer doesn't do it, they've lost their window of opportunity. They're moving forward in the contract without it. 2 great examples for you. A simple vocabulary question could be over an addendum or an amendment. An addendum adds information to a contract. An amendment changes it. So let's say I buy your property from you for $200,000. I do my inspection and I find out that there's a very high level of radon, and I ask you to repair it as a part of my inspection conditions. You as the seller say, yes, I will put in a radon mitigation system. We would write that inspection agreement on an addendum saying seller is going to install radon mitigation prior to closing, paid receipts by professional service workers or something like that. And then we're going to add that to the original purchase agreement. It adds information, and amendment changes it. Bill of sale. A bill of sale is for personal property. So if the seller is going to leave behind any personal property, piano, pool table, patio furniture, that goes on a bill of sale. It's not real estate. And we don't want it on the contract because then the appraiser has to consider the value of that in relationship to the contract price. And an appraiser appraises real estate, not pianos, pool tables, and patio furniture. They're appraisal specialists, not eBay specialists. Then I do think we've got a breach of contract. Bottom of page 56 and on page 57. For a definition, I think you need to know a suit for performance is when a buyer sues a seller. A buyer sues a seller. A suit for damages is when the seller sues the buyer. Seller sues the buyer. Then beyond that, I think you're going to have these story problems. Again, I gave this to you earlier. Buyer Amy signs an exclusive buyer contract with agent A and then goes to an open house and writes an offer with agent B. Is buyer Amy subject to possibly paying 2 commissions? Yes. Another one would maybe be a breach where a seller backed out of the contract. Would they still be liable for possibly paying you commissions? Yes, they would, because they agreed in writing that if you brought them a cash offer for $300, they would accept it. Or let's say our contract says that a seller will pay me commissions if I bring them a cash offer for $250. And I bring them a cash offer for $250 and they say no. That's a breach. That's a breach of contract. So those could be, again, a little bit more story problem, but I do think you maybe could have those on repetition. So again, I always think of contracts in 3 groups: straight up vocabulary, a situation like a minor in a contract that's voidable, and then more that are like a story problem. And again, when you read those, slow down. They're usually going to give you more content than what you really need. Stay focused on the question part of it, because those will seem long. And I will admit, when I see a long test question, when I audit the exam, I look at it and I think B. I'm just going to guess B, and I'm not going to read all this. I'm not going to read this. No, no. Don't do that. Slow down and read. You've got plenty of time. When you take the national exam, you've got 2 hours to answer 80 questions. You need a minimum score of 56. So you'll do great. But I would practice this this contracts because again, out of the 15 test questions, if you're not getting like 11 or 12 of those correct, you are going to force yourself to get everything else right. So this is a big section for you.